Hello again, my lovelies, and welcome back to my channel. Uh, Without a lot of time wasted, why don't we just go into the next chapter of Avatar: The Legend of Percy, written by WardofWinters. Chapter 14. I play Pinochle with a horse. Enjoy. I drifted in and out of sleep. The pit yawned before me, sand shifting over my skin, coiling around me with rustling leaves settling over me. A voice whispered as I swayed in the dark. Words of water and injuries and plans rustled in my ears. It was soothing in its familiarity, and I mourned as I slipped out of its hold. A spoon was in my mouth, filled with something tasting of the sweet fish that Triton shared with me, except it was a pudding. A girl with curly blonde hair hovered over me, lips curled up as she scraped bits of my chin with the spoon. Her eyes widened when they locked with mine, and she quickly looked behind her before leaning closer. "What will happen at the summer solstice?" Solstice? What? She glanced behind her again. "What's going on?" she whispered. "What was stolen? We've only got a few weeks, please." Hades, his thing was taken. "What?" she hissed. "What does—" Someone knocked on the door, and the girl quickly filled my mouth with pudding. The familiar red light of Okeanos' palace shone down on me. I blinked slowly, staring at the swirling decorations, shifting tapestries, shining floors. Okeanos wasn't there. Oh, wait, no. That was him. I blinked up at him. He was glowing, but he always did that. I thought he did at least. Faint murmurs curled over me. A hand landed on my hand. I jumped. Soothing energy flowed over me with a glow. "Oh, that was Tetisram. When did she—" I stumbled as she pulled me forward. A husky blonde was standing in the corner of the room, watching me with 100 eyes. Blue eyes blinked at me from his cheeks, his forehead, and the back of his hands. "What?" I muttered. I stumbled through the night, howls from beasts and storms winds shattering the darkness. "Come on, we're almost there!" A girl with black hair plastered to her face in the rain, in a leather jacket, was leading a little blonde-haired girl and a taller blonde-haired man. Running alongside them was Grover? They were struggling up the hill when the black-haired girl stopped. "Gah!" she yelled, shoving the younger girl to the older boy. "I'll hold them off!" "No!" the little girl cried as the blonde-haired boy held her tight. "Go, you have to get to safety!" The taller boy held the child in his arms, expression pinched. "Talia! Go!" Grover tucked them up, the older boy pulling the girl with him. They'd gotten a few steps before the first terror arrived. The black-haired girl raised a spear, a shield forming on her arm, and lashed out. Lightning flashed, the storm raged. The children screamed. The fight surged up the hill. The black-haired girl, Talia, gave ground before the hordes searching for her. "Talia!" Lightning flashed. Blood spilled. The girl fell. Lightning blinded me, crackled through the air, and an oak tree rose above the hill. The room was empty. No one was there. I slipped away. "Percy?" I whipped around at the familiar call, the familiar voice. The voice I'd missed so much, the person I'd missed so much. Triton. His tails glittered in the red-blue light, the flares twining over its glowing. His eyes shone with worry, trident vanishing from sight as he held out his hands to me. Percy, oh no, you... I tumbled into his arms, tears welling up. Everything that had happened since the solstice crashed down on me. The fight at school, the fight with the Minotaur, my mom gone in a shimmer of light, my mom gone. I cried for what happened with Miss Dots. I cried for the pain I'd felt from the lightning. I cried for the loss of my mom. I cried in Triton's arms. I shouldn't have left you alone, he murmured, adding a softer curse under his breath. I've got you, Percy, you're okay, you're safe. I gasped for breath, my body aching, my heart aching even more. I leaned into Triton's hug, clung to the comfort, the safety. It hurts, I choked out, unsure what part I was speaking of. I'm so sorry, Percy. So Rama. His voice was soft. It ached too. I've got you. Triton tucked me into an alcove. I wondered at the similarity between this and Tetis Ranono. Both offered comfort in soft words and back rubs. But with Triton, I was truly safe. Where are you? Triton asked softly, urgently. Where are you right now, Percy? I considered, through my tears and pain, where I was. The alcove and the comfort, the reminder of Tetisran. I was not there, the currents not deep and pressing, but I was in a palace? I tucked closer to Triton, ignoring the armor digging into my cheek. Where I was didn't really matter, did it? Triton was here, and that meant I was safe. No, he said softly. You're dreaming, Percy. Where is your body? I was dreaming? I knew that. I did, but also, I didn't want to be dreaming. Percy? Camp, I whispered. That was where Mom had vanished. That was where I'd killed the Minotaur. My chest ached and tears spilled out once more. Mom! Triton tugged me closer, his voice sharp and urgent. Percy, you must listen to me. I swallowed, choking down the cries and focusing on him. Tears still welled up, and he wiped them away with gentle hands. Zeus has found you, but he cannot be certain as to who you are, not yet. You need to hide your powers. Do not use them at camp. I swallowed, eyes wide. Soha Amrama, do you understand? I nodded, pressing close once more. Triton always knew what to do. I wouldn't use my powers at camp. I would hide them, as I did at school. I could do that, no waterbending for the summer. My chest ached, but I had Triton, at least for the moment. He had a plan, I was sure. I drifted off to Triton's whispered promises that everything would be okay. I woke up to the sun on my face. My surroundings were unfamiliar. I was sitting in a deck chair on a large porch, a meadow stretched out before me with green hills in the distance. The breeze smelled like strawberries and the air felt like static. A pillow was behind my head and a blanket across my legs. It took a moment of staring at the blanket and feeling the static crackling up my arms to remember. The dreams came first, strange and jumbled, a man with many eyes, a pit, my Metua, Triton. Teton told me to hide my powers, told me to not use them at camp. He said Zeus found me. I didn't know why that was bad. Obviously, it was. He tried to kill me. I swallowed and grimaced, rubbing my throat with shaking hands. It felt like a scorpion had been using it for a nest, and my tongue was dry and achy. Everything ached, actually. I glanced around, hoping for some water, but there was none. Only a tall drink on the table beside me, that was. Like liquid blankets and breezes, humming low and soft like a lullaby. I reached for it, drawn by the soothing echo. It looked like an iced apple juice, with a green straw and paper parasol stuck through a maraschino cherry. But it felt like comfort and healing and home. My hands shook and the glass nearly slipped from my grasp when I tried to pick it up. Careful! A familiar voice said. My gaze flicked towards the railing to my left, finding Grover leaning against it. My bags were beside him and he cradled a shoebox under one arm. He was wearing blue jeans, Converse high tops, and a bright orange t-shirt that said Camp Half-Blood. There were dark bags under his eyes and his hair was messy, unbrushed. How did he wear shoes if he had hooves? You saved my life, Grover said. The least I could do. I went back to the hill and I thought you might want this. He reverently placed the shoebox in my lap. I pulled the lid off, hands still shaky and unsteady. The lid fell off to the ground. Inside were two black and white bull's horns, both muddy with uneven bases from where my eyes had shattered them. The Minotaur, I whispered, the memories of the rush to camp slamming into me. I'd half hoped that was a dream as well. Percy, it isn't a good idea. That's what he's called, though, I said stubbornly, hands tightening on the shoebox. In the myths, he's the Minotaur, half man, half bull terror. Terror? Grover asked, frowning. You mean monster? I don't like calling them monsters, I said, staring at the horns. I knew about monsters. Gabe was one. I didn't like calling the beings of the myths monsters. They were called that, I knew that, but it made me uncomfortable. The myths also call them terrors, so I used that. Grover shrugged. Well, I guess, but yeah, that was the bull man. You've been out for 2 days, though. How much do you remember? It was hard to tell the dreams apart from reality. I'd seen the tree form from a girl. I'd seen Teton, his guidance. I'd seen a man with many eyes. The gaping pit, the red light of the deep ocean, the Minotaur. Well, that was real. That meant, but maybe part of that was a dream. Maybe my mom didn't. My mom. I couldn't finish the question. Grover knew it regardless, and his head lowered, his eyes on the ground. I looked away, staring out at the meadow, swaying groves of trees, and the winding stream glittering amongst acres of strawberries. The sky shone in a beautiful blue above rolling hills and the huge oak tree that was once a girl. It was a picturesque scene, peaceful and gentle and soft. It seemed like a safe haven, and I could understand why my mom had been told to send me here. It was wrong, though. My mom was gone. She had died in the Minotaur's hands. I I wouldn't see her again. She was gone, 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 gone. The world should have been tumbling into darkness. The sun should have hidden behind the hills. The sky should be dark and dreary. The skies themselves should be mourning. Nothing should have looked beautiful when my mom was dead. Tears blurred my eyes. I'm sorry, Grover sniffled. I'm a failure, and I'm the worst satyr in the world. He stumped his foot and his shoe flipped off, revealing the inside was filled with styrofoam with a hoof-shaped hole. Oh, sticks, he mumbled. Thunder rolled across the clear sky in tune with a flash across my skin. I didn't care about that, nor the way Grover felt. My mom had been taken, squeezed tight, until she bled golden light and disappeared with burning shadows. Mortals didn't bleed golden light. They didn't vanish in golden light. Mortals died and got funerals. Did that mean I'm sorry? Grover repeated miserably as he pulled on his shoe again. I stared intently at the horns in my lap, hope warming my chest. She could still be alive. I was still alone, and I had no one to help me, no one to go to, but she could be alive, and that I didn't know how to find her. I didn't know where she was. I knew this was a summer camp, so I would have to leave at the end of summer. I wasn't sure where I'd go. Maybe Okeanosari would accept me. He was my Metua, and if he didn't, maybe Triton would. I wouldn't go to Gabe. Grover was still sniffling, eyes red and dark, hands wringing the hem of his shirt. I wanted to be mad at him. I was angry. I felt betrayed. He'd lied to me all year long, maybe even led the Minotaur to us, but he was trying to help. He was trying to protect me. He didn't deserve the guilt. It wasn't your fault, I said softly. Yes, it was. It was my job to protect you. I peeked up at him, confused by that. How was he going to protect me? He wasn't much of a fighter after all. Did my mom ask you to? No, but it's my job. I'm a keeper, or well, I was. I rubbed my head. It was rubbing stellily. Out of all my body aches, I thought that the headache was the worst. Why? Don't strain yourself, Grover said. Here. He leaned over to pick up the glass for me, putting the straw to my lips. I took a sip and blinked. That didn't taste at all like what I was expecting. I thought it would be like fruity, maybe like apple juice, even if it wasn't. But it tasted like chocolate chip cookies. My mom's chocolate chip cookies. I swallowed hard, blinking back tears, and I took another sip. I savored the taste, even if it was strange, as a liquid instead of a solid. The drink filled my body with warmth, energy pooling and spreading through me. It felt as if my mom had just brushed her hand through my hair, kissed me on the cheek, and given me a cookie the way she would when I was younger. The world felt a little brighter. My chest felt a little looser. Before I knew it, I'd drained the glass, the ice cubes clicking at the bottom, not melted in the slightest. Was it good? Grover asked. I nodded, licking my lips. Yeah. And how do you feel? How do you feel now? I considered that for a moment. I was still sad, still mad, still missed my mom. I still ached, a full body thing that lingered in the background, and my arms were crackling with static. There was something else there, enhancing what I felt, and something a bit like twining vines too. But my head wasn't throbbing like before, more like an echo of a headache now, and I actually felt like I could move without collapsing. Thus my mouth and throat felt mostly normal now, rather than all achy and dry. Like I could kill the Minotaur again? I decided. He winced but nodded. That's good. I don't think you should risk drinking any more of that stuff. I frowned. What do you mean? He ignored my question and took the empty glass, setting it back on the table. Come on, Kieran and Mr. D are waiting. Grover led me around the porch, which wrapped around what appeared to be a large farmhouse. My legs were weak, and despite the strange drink, I still struggled to walk too far. Despite that, I grabbed my bags and waterskin from Grover, shoving the minotaur horns into the duffel and slung them over my shoulders as I followed him. We moved slowly, Grover patiently waiting as I leaned on the railing of the porch. It was a bit odd, being the slower one. I was used to being the one waiting for Grover, but here he wasn't using his forearm crutches and was walking with an odd gait. I guess that was due to being a satyr. We turned around the corner of the house and my breath caught. We were definitely on the north shore of Long Island. I could see the waters glittering in the distance just beyond the valley, and between here and the water there was a lot. The landscape was dotted with buildings that looked like ancient Greek architecture. There was an open pavilion, an amphitheater, and a circular arena. Scattered around those were many more buildings with gleaming columns and carvings. I could see impressions from where I stood. Closer was a volleyball court, and beyond that a small lake with canoes on it. Near the lake and before the pavilion stood a variety of cabins. On the volleyball court were people, kids in bright orange t-shirts, running around, and beyond that a few riding horses. Horses that I could have sworn had wings. The end of the porch drew my gaze quickly, though, as the sensation of curling vines threaded over my skin, joined by pins and needles in my arm, as if they'd fallen asleep. I could feel every spark of static on my arms, the beating of my heart, the brush of the fabric on my skin. At the end of the porch sat two men, a familiar one and the one who radiated power. We moved forward slowly, and I noticed the blonde-haired girl from before. She hadn't been a dream then. She leaned against the porch railing beside them. The man, the one draped in curling vines and too much everything, was short but stout. He had a rounded face with a strong nose and sharp eyes. His hair was curly and so black it was purple. Or maybe so purple it was black. He was wearing a tiger-patterned Hawaiian shirt and tapping a deck of cards with a finger. As we drew close, I noticed something else, only noticeable because of how sharp every sensation was. A faint electrical itch crawling down my spine. That's Mr. D, Grover murmured to me, interrupting my thoughts. He's the camp director. Be polite. The girl, that's Annabeth Chase. She's just a camper, but she's been here longer than just about anybody. And of course, you already know Kieran. He pointed at the guy with his back to me. He sat in a very familiar wheelchair and wore a very familiar tweed jacket. Around him was a very familiar buzzing. Mr. Brunner? I said. The ex-Latin teacher turned and smiled at me. He seemed quite pleased despite everything that had happened. Ah, good, Percy, he said. Now we have 4 for Pinochle. I blinked. What? He waved me to a chair to the right of Mr. D, who studied me with purple eyes and heaved a great sigh. Oh, I suppose I must say it. Welcome to Camp Half-Blood. There. Now don't expect me to be glad to see you. I blinked again, a bit confused, but bowed my head in greeting. I didn't know who he was, but he was definitely powerful. Peyton's lessons emphasized respecting those more powerful than yourself, if only to stay safe. Thank you, sir, I offered politely as I sat. He considered me, gaze intense. I glanced back at Mr. Brunner. Kieran. Annabeth? Mr. Brunner/Kieran called the blonde girl. She came forward and Mr. Brunner, Kieran, smiled at me. This young lady nursed you back to health, Percy. Annabeth, my dear, why don't you go and check on Percy's bunk? We'll be putting him in cabin 11 for now. Annabeth nodded, studying me. Sure, Kieran. She looked about my age, although taller, like most people my age, and she looked athletic with a deep tan and curly blonde hair. Her eyes were a striking grey, intimidating and yet familiar. I wasn't sure where I'd seen them before. She studied me, and for a second I wondered if she was going to praise me for defeating the Minotaur. Instead, she said, You drool in your sleep. Well, that was uplifting. She sprinted off, down the lawn, her blonde hair flying behind her like a bolt of silk. So, I said, ready to change subject. You work here, Mr. Brunner? No, Kieran? I thought that was pronounced Chiron. Ah, yes, that's how many pronounce my name these days. It's a leftover from the late Roman era. C's in the early days were all K sounds. But as time passed, language changed and it changed to a more S-like sound. Proper spelling of Chiron is actually Kheeiron. These days, most campers just use Chiron instead, since it's pronounced about the same. So yes, it is Chiron, not Chiron. Nor Mr. Brunner. That was just a pseudonym. Okay, I muttered. Once a teacher, always a teacher, it seemed, and I knew some of that about C's and K's and all. Just didn't realize Chiron was one of the words like that. There were probably other pronunciation rules that I'd never learned, though. I turned to the camp director. And I should just call you Mr. D? Is that short for something? Is there anything else I should call you? Mr. D paused in shuffling the cards, turning his gaze back to me. It was like a physical weight, and he seemed uncertain whether to be disgusted or flattered. Young man, he said finally, names are a powerful thing. You don't go around using them for no reason. Be as that may be, you can call me Milord if you like. A faint smile twitched his lips, and Kieran sighed. All right, Milord, I said, resisting the urge to smile. Mr. D hid a grin behind his drink. You don't have to call him Milord, Percy. He's just being pretentious. Mr. D's eyes flashed, but he said nothing. I frowned. Anyways, Kieran continued, I must say I'm glad to see you alive. It's been a long time since I've made a house call to a potential camper. I'd hate to have wasted my time. I stared. They'd certainly done a swell job ensuring my safety. You see, my year at Yancey Academy to instruct you was a house call. Grover could tell you were something special when he met you and contacted me. I thought it would be beneficial to come upstate to see. I frowned. You came to Yancey Academy just to teach me. Honestly, I wasn't sure about you at first. We contacted your mother, let her know we were keeping an eye on you in case you were ready for Camp Half-Blood, but you still had so much to learn. Nevertheless, you made it here alive, and that's always the first test. I stared some more. Why was that the first test? Why did I have to survive to what? Be worthy of the camp? Was that how land camps worked? It's nothing like sea camps from what I've heard. My mom died. Grover, Mr. D said impatiently, are you playing or not? Yes, sir. Grover trembled as he took the fourth chair. He seemed afraid of Mr. D. Clearly, he knew who Mr. D was. Curling vines and sharpened senses had me suspecting who he might be. You do know how to play Pinochle, yes? Mr. D eyed me suspiciously. I'm afraid I'm afraid not, my Lord D. Lord D grinned while Kieran sighed. Kieran deserved it. Petty revenge for the year of me freaking out over him. Plus, I was pretty sure Lord D was someone who deserved the title Lord. Well, Lord D told me, looking pleased. It is, along with gladiator fighting and Pac-Man, one of the greatest games ever invented by humans. I would expect all civilized young men to know the rules. But I suppose in your case, it's simply a gap in your education. We'll fix it now. Thank you, Lord D, I said, politely, using my princely smile. Kieran looked at the ceiling for a moment. I hid my smile, feeling satisfied with my petty actions. Everything still ached, and the electric itch of the curse made me really want to scratch my back. Plus, the pins and needles feeling was going to drive me mad at some point, especially when combined with the crackling, crawling static. But at least I could annoy Kieran. I turned to him. Kieran, what is this camp for? And why would you go to Yancy Academy just to teach me? Lord D huffed. I asked the same question. He's of much more use here. The camp director dealt the cards, and Grover flinched every time one landed in his pile. Kieran smiled at me sympathetically, as if he'd been answering my question, not having to do the etymology of words, and hadn't made me think he was trying to kill me during the school year. Percy, he said, what did your mother tell you? Do you mean before she disappeared in a flash of gold light and burning shadows? Because we were a bit busy trying and failing not to die. Kieran winced. Grover looked confused, and Lord D snorted. Yes, before that would be probably the best. Are you bidding? Kieran sighed and shot Lord D a sharp look. What did your mother say to you? I scowled at the cards, hiding my annoyance at Kieran with my confusion over the game. She said she was afraid to send me here, even though my Metua wanted me to come. She said I might never go home once I was here and that she wanted to keep me close. Typical, Lord D muttered, his gaze on me heavy and sharp. That's how they usually get killed. Now are you bidding or not? I'm afraid I don't understand how the bidding works, Lord D. He sighed but explained the bidding to me. I bid. I'm afraid there's too much to tell. Kieran said, I'm afraid our usual orientation film won't be sufficient. Orientation film? I asked. No. Kieran decided while Lord D rolled his eyes. Well, let's see. You know that Grover is a satyr. You know that you killed the Minotaur. Though how I haven't the foggiest idea. That's no small feat, lad. Yeah, no kidding. Theseus killed it with the advice and aid of 2 gods after years of fighting. The fact that I managed to kill it was insane. What you might not know is that the great powers are at work in your life. Gods, the forces you call the Greek gods, are very much alive. Okay, I said, confused by why he seemed to think that was surprising. There were lots of different gods. Triton taught me about them. Kieran blinked. Oh, a royal marriage! Trick, trick! Lord D cackled as he tallied up his points. Mr. D, Grover asked timidly, if you're not going to eat it, could I have your Diet Coke can? Oh, all right. Grover bit a huge shard out of the empty aluminium can. You don't have any questions about that, Percy? Kieran asked, leaning forward. No, I don't think so. Gods are real. They live around us. Lord D is probably one. The lightning bolt that blew up Smelly Gabe's car last night was probably sent by one. I'm at a camp involving them. Anything else I missed? Lord D snorted. No, you covered it pretty well. Cool, is that a good hand? I placed my cards down. Oh, yeah, a royal marriage, yes, that's good. Lord D showed me how to tally my points. So you understand that gods are here, that they exist? I nodded. Yeah, is that all? Kieran stared. I suppose that covers that introduction. Can I guess which god you are, Lord D? He looked amused. Why not? Kieran sighed again and shuffled through his cards. I paused for a moment, considering the purple eyes, the curling vines, the etching of too much, Grover's deference, and went through what I knew of the gods before deciding I was probably right. You're Dionysus, the god of wine and madness. He tilted his head, studying me with those heavy eyes. What gave it away? The vines and prickling too much that clung to my skin. There aren't a lot of gods, at least that I know, whose name starts with a D, and I needed something more than my sense. Tritons had no powers, but I couldn't turn those off. Grover seemed nervous when you and the satyrs are associated with you and in the myths, and I'm pretty sure you were Pan's dad? His attention bore down on me as Grover did a double take. I am. Not many know that. It's not explicitly stated in the myths. Agiain. That was from my lesson with Triton over the lineage of the gods. It's just made sense, appearance-wise, and, with your connection with Hermes and all. Anyways, I'm right. He hummed, eyes knowing but nodded. I am indeed Dionysus. He waved his hands and made a goblet appear on the table as if the sunlight had bent and woven the air into glass. The goblet filled itself with red wine. The twisting vines had wrapped around me, threaded over my skin and tangling me. I knew they weren't really there, but they were still present. Pins and needles I could do without, though. Mr. D, Kieran warned, your restrictions. Lord D looked at the wine in faint surprise. Electric sparkling itches trailed over my spine and my shoulders. Dear me! He looked at the sky and yelled, Old habits, I'm sorry! Lord D waved his hand again, and the wine glass changed into a fresh can of Diet Coke. He glared at it like it offended him, then popped the top and went back to the card game. Kieran winked at me. Mr. D offended his father a while back, took fancy to a wood nymph who'd been declared off limits. My brows furrowed. What? Did Zeus put it, her, him, them Off limits? Why? Did the nymph want that? Did Zeus fancy the nymph? Was it something else? Gods were weird. Yes, Lord D confessed. Father loves to punish me. First time, prohibition. Ghastly. It was horrible 10 years. Second time, well, she was really pretty and I couldn't stay away. It's not like Agiain minded, and I didn't. No, what about the stalker anyways? The second time, he sent me here, Half-Blood Hill, summer camp for brats like you, though most of have worse manners. Be a better influence, he told me. Absolutely unfair. Perhaps he didn't like kids, or just being made to spend all his time with us kids, or perhaps it was just that he couldn't drink wine, a domain he ruled over. Yeah, that didn't sound nice. That seems unfair, sir. Exactly! He huffed and laid his cards down. I believe I win. Not quite, Mr. D. Kieran said. He sat down straight and began to tally the points. The game goes to me. Lord D glared at him, but just sighed through his nose as if he was used to being beaten by the ex-Latin teacher. He stood then, the chair scraping over the floor. Grover scrambled to his feet as well. I'm tired, Lord D said. I believe I'll take a nap before the sing-along tonight. But first, Grover, we need to talk again about your less than perfect performance on this assignment. He turned to me. Cabin 11, Percy Jackson. He swept into the farmhouse grandly, Grover following miserably. I frowned. Is Grover in trouble? Kieran shook his head, but failed to hide his troubled expression. Old Dionysus isn't really mad. He just hates his job. He's been grounded, I suppose. He can't stand waiting another century before he's allowed to go back to Olympus. I nodded sagely. Right, Mount Olympus. Got it. Where even was the gods' domains these days? They lived in Aether, from what I remembered, but I knew there was a central entrance, just not where it was. I eyed Kieran as he started putting the cards back into the deck. So you're Kieran from the myths. I didn't realize you were immortal, or a human? I was granted a wish by the gods. I wish to be able to teach as long as I was needed. Well, or am needed. He smiled. I am still here to assume. So I assume I am still needed. And I assure you that I am very much not human. He looked fairly human. I nodded. Right. I fiddled with the conch charm on my bracelet. Now then, we should go to your bunk in cabin 11. There will be new friends to meet and plenty of time for lessons tomorrow. Besides, there will be s'mores at the campfire tonight, and I simply adore chocolate. He then rose from his wheelchair, his waist getting higher and higher, while his legs stayed in place. I gaped for a long minute until the first leg came out, and then I understood. The wheelchair. It was enchanted. It hit his animal half, and that was so... Wow! I'd never seen a centaur before. He was very tall, and I had to crane my neck to look up at him. Oh, what a relief, he said. I'd been cooped up in there so long my fetlocks had fallen asleep. Now come on, Percy Jackson. Let's meet the other campers. Well, we certainly know who's in the pit, talking to poor little Percy, but he seems to be far more witty than in the original. And before we head out, how about we go back to the translations of Hal Maharan and the other terminology and suffixes? Well, in Halmaharan, we have Percy, which is the way that the Halmaharan version of Percy is spoken. Then Suha Amrama, Little Kraken, which is adorable. Metua, as always, meaning father, and Areo for the F word. The suffixes, we have Ari, which means old king, and Ranono, the counterpart, being old queens. We again have the terrors, which is, as Percy described in today's chapter, the way he calls monsters. Then we have Chiron for the phonetic spelling of Chiron or Chiron. Then Centaur, the same with the Centaur or Centauroi. And then we have the Ether, which is a primordial god of the heavens and light. The gods that live amongst the ether it's both a place and a god, the heavens above. And that wraps up everything for today. Don't forget to go to WardofWinters' original fanfiction to give them all the kudos they deserve. And don't forget to check out their Discord server as well as their Tumblr. Before we go, grab yourself a drink, grab yourself a snack. You've been doing a lot today. Get some rest. Don't forget your medicines as well. Those are important. And with that, I'll see you all next time, my lovelies. Ta-ta!